Before we begin the podcast, we have two important announcements to make. First, we want to announce our winner for the Trumpet the Miracle Wolf Pup book series. The winner of these books is at Holly M. Garvey. We're going to contact you and get your shipping information so we can send these books out to you as soon as possible. Thank you for all of your support and entering the contest. We would also like to acknowledge that FeedSpot has selected the Wolf Connection podcast as one of the top 20 best Southern California environment podcasts. They went through thousands of podcasts here in Southern California, and the Wolf Connection ranks number 3. This could not have happened without the support of all of you out there for listening, sharing, and spreading the Wolf Connection message all across the globe. A huge howls to you all. Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kaufman. All right, it's our back-to-back Red Wolf podcast. We did Mexican Gray Wolves 2 weeks ago, and then we've had two talking about Red Wolves. So it's great that Steve and I are able to really cross the spectrum here as we talk about wolves on this podcast continually, and really excited to have the executive director of the Red Wolf Coalition for 18 years coming to us from North Carolina, Kim Wheeler. Kim, I'm happy that you're feeling better. I know we had to push a little bit, but really great to have you here with Stephen and I. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you. I'm excited to be able to come on your podcast and talk about red wolves. Of course, I think they're the best wolf, but maybe I'm a little biased, but thank you very much. And thank you for 2 episodes dedicated to the red wolf.
Yeah, it sort of fell in our lap, which is really great. And it's, we've talked about red wolves, I think, in passing in other podcasts and other individuals who have sort of crossed paths on their way to working with grays. So it's just really great to really get into the meat and potatoes about the red wolf. Just give everybody a background, Kim, where you grew up, how you came to this position at Red Wolf Coalition. You know, were wolves a thing from childhood? Hey, this is where I want to be, or did it sort of grow over time?
It actually started for me in 5th grade. I started out in New Jersey. We moved to North Carolina when I was 13. I had a 5th grade teacher that was very interested in indigenous populations and their lifestyle, just everything about them. We were only supposed to spend half a semester, and because we were so interested, she spent all year. And you just can't help but, if you study indigenous people, you know how animals figure into their culture. And I think that's really what started me being very interested in wolves, and just sort of stayed with me. Never had any dogs growing up. My sister was allergic, so we didn't really have pets. We had a turtle and a fish. I think that's what we had. And my wolf life started at about age 40. The International Wolf Center in Ely, Minnesota has socialized gray wolves, and they acquire pups. Their animals do not breed, and they were looking for people to come and help socialize the animals. And so I applied, and that was in 2004. And I went, and I feel like it sounds hokey when I say that first night I had my aha moment, like, this is what I'm supposed to do, but how in the world can I help the Wolf Center in northern Minnesota? And I'm in North Carolina. And I came back and learned about red wolves, found the coalition, did some volunteer work. And then they asked me to join the board. And then there were some changes here in the office. And they asked me if I would consider taking this job. So I didn't move here. My daughter was in high school, so I didn't want to move her in the middle of high school. So I waited till she went to college, and the rest is history, as they say. So my background is sales and marketing, and which comes in handy. Yeah. I'm not a scientist. I've learned everything literally at the knee of the biologist.
Wow. Yeah. That's such an amazing journey, though, because if you think about it, to start a little bit, because I'm sure you've met individuals who, from the moment the get-go, like you said, you had the the itch at 5 or in 5th grade or whatever it was. And most of those people go on to be biologists or scientists, and that's just the track.
Mhm.
So for you to find that and find your niche as an executive director of a big organization, that's a huge thing. What is it like for you? And it's we keep this seems to be a theme lately with Stephen and I, that we find more East Coast grown up people who fall into the wildlife path.
Yeah.
Was that, and you said, you know, you loved animals from an early point and the wolf journey started at 40, but is it an allure for you or a draw from New Jersey that you were like, I got to do something a little bit different? Like you said, backgrounds in sales and marketing. Was there always this, I want to work with animals?
No, actually, the indigenous people aspect stayed with me. After 5th grade on, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer and represent indigenous people because as you learn the story, I hope most people are appalled what we did to those folks. And so that's what I wanted to do. But somewhere along the way, I decided I wasn't smart enough or I wasn't whatever. And I just went into sales and marketing. And that's just where I stayed till, like I said, about 40. And then I just, that experience at the Wolf Center really ignited something. And some people find their path early in life. Mine was midlife or whatever you want to call it, and have been here for 18 years, been in the valleys and the peaks and the valleys and the peaks. And I certainly have grown and changed over those years. My opinions, my thoughts, how I talk to people, everything has changed. I mean, the Red Wolf story is so compelling, not necessarily from the resilience of the animal, but the people that have worked so hard and diligently to try to make sure that this animal has an opportunity for a wild life. I mean, it's just inspiring. For me, it's inspiring.
Yeah, I just hearing about, and I think knowing about red wolves and understanding the plight that is going on with this species, it is really heart wrenching to a degree because you realize that it's really solely dependent upon humans at this point in its existence to survive. Do you have like what is the current state of the population? I know the numbers fluctuate year to year.
Mhm.
Again, I know it's mostly in the 20 to 35, 40-ish range. That's usually where it sticks. Is that where the population's at now? Is there a little bit more forward momentum, or are the populations growing a little bit? What can you give us, if any, information about that?
So the current wild population, known population that wears an orange tracking collar is 13. The Fish and Wildlife estimates that there are other animals out there that during various points in time where they kind of step back their management. So they think maybe roughly 2025 is about the number. I believe there are, but that does not include pups born last year or this year. I'm sorry, this year. The pup numbers don't go into the population count until they're collared. So the Fish and Wildlife will be getting ready to do that very soon, start collaring. So I believe of the pups born this year, there are 7. There's 7 or 8 left. I have not heard the most recent number to know if everybody is still on the landscape, which is a good number. We've had a lot of releases, adult releases, which may be something you're going to talk about a little bit later in the podcast. So I won't jump into that. So I do feel like there is forward momentum, but I also feel like we're somewhat a little bit how we were back in 1987 when this program started. Population numbers were low. We started with 8 animals. And again, it's not me, it's the service, it's the collective we. So I want to clarify that. I tend to do that a lot, and I'm trying to get better about identifying the responsible people. But there's also 40 years of knowledge versus in 1987 when they had no idea what the wolves would do. Now, when the service is looking at doing adult releases from captivity, they at least have an idea about what kind of animals are they looking for? What characteristics? How do they do a better job within that captive program, which is now part of the SAFE program, Saving Animals from Extinction. So when you hear me say the SAFE program, it's the animals under human care. And so there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of information that moves forward with that, even though the population numbers don't look high. When I started in 2005, there were about 130 on the landscape. And that doesn't really scare me. There have been a lot of things that have happened. And I think the main thing to remember there is how many animals can successfully succeed on in the wild now. Is 130 the number? Is it 25? I mean, what were the culture here? What would the people allow now? So there's a lot of things in the mix that maybe they didn't think of as the program was moving along, but now they have to, just because of circumstances and situations that have happened.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about, is a more long-term plan. I mean, it's probably premature because they're in such dire straits still, but is there a long-term red wolf plan that exists somewhere, or is it just at the point still where it's like, well, let's do our best with the population we have and just keep getting new animals into that population?
That's a great question. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife just finished a new recovery plan that was submitted the end of September. And so I've been part of, there were about 50 of us that were on the Red Wolf Recovery Plan planning team, people from all walks of life, lots of different states, state agency, federal agencies, local agencies. So 1999, mid 1990s was the last recovery plan that had been written. So this recovery plan is a new one. I feel like it is comprehensive in that it's a great roadmap. So the recovery plan is done. The population viability assessment, what really looks at the captive and the wild population and what will it take to achieve 400 animals in the SAFE program, and how do we increase that wild population? It's from a very scientific standpoint. There were many of those meetings that I was on. I had no idea what they were saying, but it was still very interesting to be part of. And then the third component is the recovery implementation strategy. And what that does is everything that you laid out in that recovery program that you're going to do, you in the recovery implementation strategy is how you're going to do that. So one thing might be, we are going to help reduce hybridization events between red wolves and coyotes. So how do you do that? Adaptive management. You sterilize the coyotes, put them back out in their home ranges, and they hold a place. They can't breed with other red wolves. They can't breed with other coyotes. So that does help to reduce those hybrid events and also helps to reduce the coyote population. So that sort of activity would be listed in the RIS. There's also information in there about the SAFE program and looking at doing a better job of making sure they have animals ready for release. So there is a path forward, and a lot of it, the recovery plan is out, the PVA is out. Now the RIS doesn't have to go through all of the approvals that a recovery plan does. So I'm not sure at what point in time, if that goes out to the public, or that's more or less just an internal working document on how the service gets things done on the ground.
Got it. And that's something. So the numbers that they're looking for, it seems, at least from what you just said, Kim, is that we're looking at 400 animals total. We're talking about in the wild and also in the SAFE or is that 400?
Just the SAFE.
Just the SAFE, and roughly how many in the wild population?
We did not assign a number.
Okay.
Because we don't, will 130, there's room for 130, but you have to take into consideration the culture and the people. Where can they live? Right now, they're on 2 federal properties, Alligator River and Pocosin Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. And so the service has really done a great job in the last couple of years of talking to more people. And so they're sort of regaining the trust of locals in the area. And they obviously have looked at a map and know what connectivity should occur. Wolves that are leaving Alligator River, they know what landowners around there are wolf friendly, who is not wolf friendly, what kind of conversations need to go on. I mean, because they're going to disperse. If the more
Right.
there's reproduction, they gotta go somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one question I wanted to ask too, is that it seems really that they're boxed in such a very finite area in North Carolina, and that it's just like this is it, and you can't, and not that they're, it just seems that way when you look at it and you're like, okay, red wolves exist in this little portion and that's really it. And obviously you just laid out that, hey, we have individuals that are getting talked to about it's really the social tolerance aspect. Yeah. Where does the social tolerance aspect fit that you've seen at this point in 2023 for red wolves, for the breeding program, for them being reintroduced into the wild? I know there's a lot of mishaps back and forth where people mistake them for coyotes, but where does the social tolerance aspect sit at this current moment while everything's happening?
From my vantage point, I do think there are more productive conversations going on than probably in any time since I've been here. And that is because the service has worked really hard to become very transparent. This is what we're doing. Come to a public meeting. They're trying to keep their website up to date with information. They're government agencies, so sometimes it does take forever to get information out. They developed a Red Wolf hotline number, and the person that answers that is Emily Weller, who is the coordinator of this program. So you're not getting just somebody sitting there answering phones. You're actually getting somebody that runs this program. And so Joe Madison, the local field coordinator, his phone number is everywhere. I mean, there are big signs when you travel down the major corridor heading in North Carolina to the Outer Banks. And there's a phone number on there, and that's Joe's phone number. And so they have really made themselves more accessible. I feel like anybody that doesn't know who to call, what rock have they been living under? But maybe that's just me. And I think that's important. That maybe hasn't changed the tolerance, but it has changed the conversations. And they now know who to call and now know who to ask questions to. And you guys know that sometimes that's half the battle. You have a question, you don't know who to ask. And so you run with whatever you think the answer is. And you tell a neighbor, and that neighbor tells a neighbor, and so on and so forth. And so I think between what the service is doing, organizations like the Red Wolf Coalition, because we're located here in Northeastern North Carolina, I mean, we live among the people. I hear things, we have conversation. And so I think that has become a huge component in the social aspect. And I hope, it's job security. There'll never be an end to it. There'll be an end to me at some point in time. But it's always job security. There are always conversations to have. And just when I think I've taken a big giant step, I meet somebody and they push me back 12 more steps. So it's important for all of us to continue to learn how to communicate better. And so I do think that social tolerance is improving. I think the state of North Carolina, who hasn't always been the best partner, the service and the state are working on that relationship, and it is getting better. And that's going to be key, that the state of North Carolina not just says they're behind the program, but does it with their actions. And that means in talking with people, law enforcement, when there's been a mortality, that's going to be key moving forward. And I do see some very positive steps there.
Yeah. I mean, historical social tolerance. Well, I guess the question is, what was the red wolf what was their range historically? How far out were they? What was their original?
So Texas, Louisiana, and as you come across Arkansas, Missouri. There's some conversation about whether it went all the way up to New York or about just as high as Pennsylvania. So it was an East Coast animal. I mean, it is really America's only wolf. It's from here. We know the gray wolf is not. And so it's an East Coast animal. So we've been having a lot of conversation. It's been interesting with a lot of indigenous people. And I just went to a powwow to just like throw a different subject on Saturday of the Meherrin tribe. And they had some pictures. And of course, they had a picture of a wolf. And I'm like, you got the wrong wolf. That's a gray wolf. You guys had the red wolf. Look up. I'll send you a picture, but you got the wrong wolf. Like, let me try to write some of that a little bit.
So how much
Wow.
does anybody know what portion of that historical range could be successfully occupied by red wolves now, if there were enough of them? What states because they're gonna, like you said, the more wolves there are, the more they're gonna keep pushing their domain further and further and further.
Yeah.
Has there been some talk about how many of those states in that historical range could actually house red wolves still?
That's $1 million question.
Yeah.
The service, part of the recovery plan, are to find 2 other recovery sites so that there's a total of 3. But we all are in agreement that we have to get it right in North Carolina, that all those boxes have to be checked. And a lot of people feel like this program has been going on long enough, and if they can't check the boxes, then the program's not successful. Obviously, I don't agree with that. The service is not actively looking at this time for any other recovery sites. I think there have been a couple organizations that have done independent studies and say, there's places here, places there. But you got to understand, you can't just say, oh, there's a swath of land in Virginia that we think that would be great. I mean, that's fine to say that, but you got to start talking with the state first. Are you interested? And what's their first question going to be? How's it going in North Carolina? What are you doing right? The social element, the science, there's a lot of things. So no, they've not been actively looking. I think there are a lot of people that would love to have them, but wolf work is hard. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
Think about people. I knock on your door and say, hey, I'm with the Fish and Wildlife, and we are looking in about a year to introduce red wolves into your state. Oh, and by the way, it's a mile down the road. That's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pre-work that has to be done. And I think a lot of this social work being done here will be very beneficial to the next place that they find.
Yeah. Do they need like gray wolves need these enormous pieces of land to thrive on? Are red wolves more like coyotes in that they can adapt to spaces that are a little bit more urban, or do they need massive swaths of wilderness in the same way?
So not like the coyotes. They're definitely not urban. The largest prey that they have are white-tailed deer. So one of the reasons Alligator River was chosen at first, it's surrounded on 3 sides by water. So it acted as a natural boundary. At the time of the recovery program, there really were not a lot of coyotes. They didn't come until about the 1990s is when they started to notice coyotes. So, definitely have to have a good prey base. Rural, not a lot of people. Wolves don't typically like people, so you don't want to put them something adjacent to a lot of people, because that's just not a good recipe for success for the animals.
Yeah. It seems like the red wolves are kind of the stepchild of the wolf world. I mean, just in, some of the stuff that you're saying, and really, honestly, some of the research that Steve and I have both seen, done, looked at, is that it's almost the forgotten wolf, and almost this, like, we're going to push this wolf species to the side because the gray wolf is so iconic in many places, and that is the beacon of the wolf fight, whichever side of the fight you're on, or whatever you want to call it. Does that make this all the more difficult because there isn't just the social tolerance for a wolf in general, there's also probably the tolerance of, is this an actual species?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Do you run into that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so for the red wolf to even have been on the endangered species list, the service would have had to look at the species. And so they all along, as we have said, it is a unique species. And so a couple years back, the National Academy of Science was tasked by Congress to determine the species of the red wolf and the Mexican gray wolf, at which they took a year and came back and submitted a report saying, yes, the red wolf is a unique species. And so our hope was at that point in time, put a pin in that criticism that this isn't even a real wolf, that it's just a hybrid, it's just a mutt, all the things that people say. Some of it went away, some of it didn't. There are some people that just hard and fast, it's not a unique species. And so that has been something that's been difficult. Not only that, but also because red wolves and coyotes will breed and produce fertile offspring, whereas gray wolves will not do that. So I can understand how people make that leap, that it's just a hybrid between a gray wolf and a coyote. And the one huge flaw in that is coyotes and gray wolves don't mate. They'll kill you.
Yeah.
A gray wolf will kill a coyote. So tell me, how did we get red wolves on two animals that don't even mate in nature? That was always my big, say what you want, but they don't mate in nature. What did they did one day and then decided the next they weren't? I mean, and why don't we have a bunch of red wolves running around in Montana or Wyoming or Yellowstone if that's the case, So that never held water for us. Never held water. That NAS study, when it came out, was huge. I mean, now you can say, we knew it, but here's scientific proof.
Yeah, and that's always something too. It seems that's also the other side of the coin with this too, is when you toss a lot of scientific evidence or any evidence that is fact-based, or not even fact-based, but just coming from a point of education science, that there are a lot of people that feel that they get talked down to, or it's not speaking in their terms. And so sometimes even when you toss that in there, there's a section of folks who might say, well, I don't really understand this or believe it. So how can I believe it? Yep. So there's always, as you know, it's a multi-tiered
it is
discussion and talk with anything having to do with wolves in general. And obviously if you throw in red wolves, it's a little bit even more complicated than that.
A perfect example. I had a guy come in, a man, this has been a couple years back, blah, 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 about the red wolf. Okay. And I started to talk to him about, you can't hunt coyotes away. They're compensatory breeders. And he was like, stop. I don't know about that science talk. And it was one of those days I was having good blood flow to the brain. And I said, are you a hunter? And he said, yes. What do you hunt? Deer. Well, do you go out and look for tracks or do anything like that before hunting season? And he said, yes. I said, then you do field science. And he looked at me, turned around and walked out. And I was like, you do understand. Don't be afraid of it. Just take a second. You do understand it because you do a little bit of it before your hunting season. But yeah, he just looked at me and just like, oh, she got me, and out he went.
I mean, it's trivial sometimes when you think about it, how similar we are, and obviously coexisting with this species for tens of thousands of years. Like you talk about the native population, the indigenous population that was inhabiting those areas where red wolves were. Is it safe to say the factors that led to this precipitous drop in this specific population was just the fact, was it as populated, I would say, as the gray wolf? Because I spoke with Eric Mulvar from Western Watersheds, and there were these somewhat detailed, or at least renderings of the populations. We're talking 150, 200 years ago. And we're talking close to 400,000 wolves across the entire what we now know as the United States. Were those populations ever that hot? Were they ever at a point where you could say there were 50,000 red wolves, 100,000 red wolves, or was it always sort of this low-lying population number, and then due to expansion, due to hunting, eradication, whatever it may be, it fell off a cliff? Do you happen to know any of that history?
No, I've never seen anything with any population numbers on it. I'd almost have to go state by state. I think the 1700s is the earliest documentation I can find of bounties being paid for red wolves here in Terrell County, where I live. So I don't know what those numbers. I know when those original service people back in the 60s started trying to figure out where the red wolf went, and they just had morphological information. They didn't have genetics, wasn't really a thing yet. They captured about 400 animals that they looked at, and then determined from that 14 are the founders of every red wolf that we know today. But I don't have any idea. I don't, I don't even know if anybody would have done any surveys like that. Be
Yeah.
interesting to know, though. Be interesting to
definitely.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
assuming that being an East Coast predator is probably habitat had to be the big thing.
Yeah, loss of habitat, unregulated hunting would have pushed them and pushed them and pushed them. So it's really cool. I don't know if you guys have been keeping up. There's a group of researchers that are looking at some really large canids in that Texas, Louisiana area, and also Galveston Island. It started with one guy that sent some pictures and got some genetic material, and they're actually finding some of those canids have a large amount of red wolf genetics in them, which to me
Yeah.
is fascinating because that's that area where they originally went in and thought they got them all. Now, I don't know why they thought they got them all, but it will be interesting as the research continues to see how that population or those populations of animals can be used to supplement the wild population and also the safe population as we know it today. Because like I said, we have 14 founders. So there's a good chance everybody's family tree crosses somewhere. And to introduce new genetics would be amazing. But I think they're many years down the road from figuring out how all that can connect. But to me, it's one of the most fascinating things going on right now.
Yeah, I remember talking about that at the symposium, the Wolf Symposium in October of 2022, because there were a couple of researchers there that specifically worked in that genetic space or in that red wolf space, and they had brought that up or it was right after that they had discovered that there were a couple in that corridor, which is wild because again, it seems like we keep seeing this every once in a while or more often now. People are saying, "Oh, this animal was extinct," and all of a sudden they find a group of them somewhere, or whatever it was, amphibians or a bird or whatever it is. So life always finds a way, it seems, to survive in these corridors, wherever these places are. If you can, Kim, go into because I don't think we got into this with Zach, being that he was a photographer, and I don't think he had the knowledge, but when you're looking to cross foster or release, what does that process entail? Because obviously you're trying to keep the ones in the safe program literally as safe as possible and not habituated, so that when they're released, they are as wild as possible. Just go through what that process is like, and what's the age if you're releasing adults. What's the age that you're trying to release them out, and do you cross foster pups, or is that too dangerous of a situation?
So I'll answer the last question first. Actually, the best method to introduce new genetics into the wild is cross fostering, because that way that pup grows up wild. So part of the charter or the responsibility of the SAFE program has always been to maintain the genetics of the original 14 founders and to have adult animals available for release. Up until the last couple years, the service and the SAFE program had not been releasing adult wolves. So a couple years back, when through litigation, the service was forced to put together a release plan, all of a sudden the coordinator, Chris Lasher of the SAFE program, gets a phone call and sort of had to scramble. It's not that they were neglecting that part. It's just it had not happened for so long. And, sometimes you sort of take your eye off the ball a little bit. And so they acknowledge that. And so in doing this new recovery plan, part of that is trying to find a better plan, a more effective plan on getting animals ready for release. So within that SAFE program and those coordinators, you have some facilities where animals are on exhibit. Because of the exhibit, the type of zoo or nature center they are, they're always going to be exhibit educational animals. And then there are other facilities like the Endangered Wolf Center in Missouri, Wolf Haven, the New York Wolf Conservation Center, just to name a few. Their enclosures are large, natural. Animals are not on exhibit. The only time they see a human being probably is when food and water are delivered. They don't have any visitors. And those are the places where you want to be sure animals are. They have the best chance at being as wild as you can be in captivity. And I know they are working on strategies to even do that better. Like, would it be better instead of a human being bringing that natural prey, that it comes in on a zip line? Is there a way to change the water and do it externally without going in so that they don't see people at all? Because obviously animals that have the least amount of recognition of animals. I mean, think about it. Even though it's a wolf and they're acting wild, there's still some recognition that I hear somebody coming, and then all of a sudden there's food. They're going to make that
Right.
connection.
Smells, yeah.
I've been taking care of captive wolves for 10 years, and I know they make that connection when I'm there. I'm bringing something. So that is something that the SAFE program has been looking at a lot in the last year, is how to do it better. They are recruiting additional zoos and nature centers that can offer those wild spaces. So within the Mexican wolf program, they actually have places that, they go here, here, and here. And after that third place, they're going to be released into the wild, sort of holding areas for released animals, again, to get them ready, that final step in getting ready. And that's what the Red Wolf Recovery Program is working toward now. They have an institution that just came on whose name escapes me at the moment. And that's what that's going to be, is like when animals go there, they're as wild as can humanly possibly be. And by having, the goal is, and the hope is, that when you fine tune this, there's better success for animals when released into the wild, because they certainly have had, over the last couple of years, animals they've had to bring back into captivity because they're just wandering too much around people, and there's just not an opportunity to change that behavior within a time frame, if they could even change that behavior by hazing and that sort of thing. Sometimes it just doesn't work and they have to pull them back. And that's unfortunate because it takes a lot of work. But I always remind people, the service can do everything they can do. They bring animals together in acclimation pens and let them stay together for months. But once they open the gate, then it's all on the wolf. And I hate sometimes that the service gets really strongly criticized for some of these releases and ones that don't make it, because it's really up to the wolf at that point in time. And that's what we all have to remember. We have our free will and they have theirs too.
Yeah. I just have two questions. My first question is, and I don't believe you mentioned this, but are the cross-fostered animals collared? Like, can anyone tell later, agents or biologists or et cetera, when they're observing a cross-fostered animal versus a wild-born?
So cross-fostering, they're done as pups before their eyes open.
So no collars.
They'll get a pit tag, they'll get an identification tag. And then later on, with the rest of the litter, they'll get an orange collar just like all the others. The only way they would know is if there's some indication on the collar. And there, for a while, they were putting letters on each of the collars so that they knew letter H was wolf number. Everybody gets a stud book number, F 1251. They would not know, I think, just by looking at it. They might know if they put a letter on that collar, they might know that collar Q is a fostered. I got to go one time, and I was fine with never doing it again, looking for dens, and they fostered a puppy, and that was really cool. They just, did the took the other pups out, identified them, blood, pit tag, rubbed them all together, put them back in. What was neat was the mom was a fostered pup, and she received a fostered pup. So to me, that was like full circle. That was really cool.
Yeah, I was just wondering if as adults there's any data about cross fostered pups versus wild pups. Like for example, data about the survival rate of cross fostered pups or wild born pups, or how many cross fostered pups get hit by cars versus wild pups. There's no kind of specific data about the comparison between those two.
So I can, without the data, but just knowing statistics, cross fostered pups, getting them at least to a year to 2 years has had better success than releases of adult wolves. Yeah.
Wow. I wonder why that is. I wonder
Well,
if
because
there's-
again,
what
those
do you got?
animals are growing up wild. They have mom and dad or siblings teaching them. Whereas wolves coming from captivity, all of a sudden, you open the gate and now they have to learn how to deal with roads and cars and external things like people. And that's, again, it's just imagine I take you, either of you as an adult, and I drop you in France. You don't know the language, you don't know
Right.
anything. But if
Yeah.
I took you as a child and you grew up in that environment, you'd have a better chance of success.
Yeah, so they know that cross fostered pups do better than releases of adult wolves, but there's no data about cross foster versus wild born pups. Survival rate.
And there's survival. Well, I mean, I think if I just look at the numbers of cross fosters across the history of the program, I mean, there was plenty of reproduction on their own.
Yeah.
So
I see.
I think their survival,
Right,
just by sheer numbers, would be great.
right. Yeah, I was just curious if that because obviously it works in terms of population, I guess, but in terms of does it work better than? No, I guess that is evidence that cross fostering doesn't necessarily have the kind of downside that I guess like a naysayer might generically come up with, saying like, well, they're more habituated than wild born pups. I'm just curious if how you measure or how you argue that kind of point, if there's any kind of data, but it sounds like it's kind of too hard to follow after they're out there.
So the cross fostered pups, they are put into a wild den before their eyes are even open. So they grow up with litter mates that are in the same age bracket. I mean, you have a 3-day window to get to foster versus adult releases. Now, some of those adult releases, some of them are single animals some of them have been family groups. And some of them have, again, been animals, just a pair that comes together and they hope for reproduction. Reproduction in an acclimation pen is always good. They had reproduction this year in acclimation pens that actually held them together longer. Again, they were trying to determine if, because that pair that was brought together, and this year it just happened to be captive males with wild born females, because we're a little on the female heavy side in the wild. If they reproduced in the pen, when you opened the gate, would they stay together? And in some instances they did. In some instances there were mortalities, either by gunshot or vehicle mortality. And so there have been a lot, when you look at it, some people would say there have been a lot of setbacks because those pairs didn't stay together because of mortalities. But this sort of thing happened at the beginning. The odds were not in favor. You have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. And so the service was recently, there was some litigation that was finalized, and they will have to present release plans for the next 8 years, which is good. That's knowing, and they're very willing to do it. And on the safe population side, they're working really hard to be sure that they always have good candidates for release. So there have been some things, even though I know litigation is trying for the service, I do think there have been a lot of good things that have come out of it. And one of them is that safe population, realizing that they had to fine tune that process by which wolves are chosen and placed in facilities that will give them the best chance for success in the wild. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about reproduction. We've got to get these numbers up to the point where we don't need to do adult releases. I think the service always likes to do the cross fostering because it's introducing new genetics. Because at one point in time on the landscape, everybody was related.
Yeah.
And you can't have that. You can't have reproduction if everybody's related.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you'll have all sorts of problems.
It's a fascinating story. I mean, obviously you can tell I could talk for hours. There's just so many different aspects that are interesting to talk about and to think about, you know, just from the science to the social to the political, and, you know, it's fascinating.
And when you say gunshots, you mean folks misidentifying red wolves as coyotes, or is it poaching?
Don't know. All I know is there's a bullet in an animal. Don't really know. That's something the service is trying to do a better job of, is law enforcement. And that goes back to that partnership with the state. You know, law enforcement here for Fish and Wildlife, I think, is one person that handles a large area. But with the state of North Carolina, there's more law enforcement on the ground. And so the most recent one, there was a pretty decent reward, but we found that just because the reward is high, people just don't talk. That money doesn't loosen any lips whatsoever. And that's interesting to me because this is very rural North Carolina. The county Riley is the poorest in North Carolina. And you would think, I think one time several years back, I don't know if the reward was at 50 grand, but it was close to it. And I thought somebody, like, for around here, that's life-changing money. That's more than some of these people make in a year. Nothing, not a squeak, not a burp, nothing.
Didn't work. Wow.
No.
Wow. I mean, you've been in this position for a long time, and obviously you see just how really, when you get into wolf work, you're getting into people work. It's really, you don't realize you have to have a sociology degree or psychology, because you're really working with the humans on the landscape or the humans in politics, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I mean, just by you saying, and a lot of these plans, when we've talked to these people in Montana and Idaho and Wyoming and Washington State, and I'm not saying all these, but we've seen wolf management plans go decades or, 5, 10, 6, 7 years without being revamped or relooked at and updated. And I think we can say what we want. I think part of it is negligence. Part of it is, like you said, sometimes it's just an oversight, and people are like, oh, we set these rules up, and these rules from 25 years ago are going to be the same as what they were, 25 years ago. And that's just not the case.
No. I
mean, it's just it's a multifaceted, multi-layered situation. I mean, for you, Kim, and for Red Wolf Coalition, what's the end goal, if there is an end goal? Because I know the mission, is obviously the education, showing everyone the value of red wolves, talking about the ecosystem, talking about the restoration of area habitats, because everything is so finite at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the coalition and yourself as if we can put the point all the way out there, what are you looking at as the ultimate goal, the ultimate endpoint, if there is one?
A self-sustaining red wolf population, whatever that number means. Animals that are on the landscape that need little human intervention. Of course, if you get to that point, then you almost get to the point of, does it need to be delisted? But I mean, even before that, you're always going to face criticism and people that don't like wolves. So that's why I always say that's job security there. But if you can show people that these animals don't need human beings messing in their business, that they're reproducing on their own, they're expanding, they're healthy, they're helping with the coyote population. I mean, that to me is success. It's success for the animal, because at the end of the day, for me and for this organization, that's what it's all about. When I lay my head down at night, did I do anything for this animal? Not that I was on a podcast and and X number of people are now going to know my name or know about the Red Wolf Coalition, but what did I do to help the red wolf? And that's the ultimate goal, is we want to have a self-sustaining red wolf population. If there's more than one, great. If there's only one and this is all we can have and it's X number of animals, then we're happy with that. Again, we're always going to have those opportunities to educate. I think the SAFE program, they're well along their way to reaching that 400 animals that they want to have in their population. And it's been great to see them grow in looking at what do we need to do to support that wild population, because that is part of what they're supposed to do. But not only just think about it, but show growth and movement toward achieving that goal, and working with other groups like the Mexican Wolf Program, because they do the same similar thing and they've been communicating more, and each, I think, group is learning from the other about what worked for you. Oh, we never tried that. I wonder if we could do that here. And so those kind of collaborations, I think, are really going to be key to success. But I think for us is have a self-sustaining red wolf population, whatever those numbers look like.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, because we've spoken with New York Wolf or Wolf Conservation Center and obviously the Mexican Gray Wolf. What are those collaborations like for you? Have you seen those grow in the 18 years that you've been at Red Wolf Coalition? Has everybody seemed to be exchanging information more and more as time goes on and these breeding programs become more of a stabilizing force for these populations?
I would say yes. Being part of the team that helped to write the recovery plan and the PVA and the RIS, it was a very diverse group, people from other states, other agencies, local landowners, local political representatives. Definitely, as I listened to, because I don't know how the service and who they're always working and doing things with. So it was really refreshing to me to hear there was the Cherokee Nation recently came and did some filming. They're working on a video about red wolves. And this gentleman was out of Oklahoma. And I thought, well, that's kind of far away, but it's really neat that they are interested and wanted to come and produce something that'll be representative of, I imagine, what a lot of indigenous nations feel about the wolf. So to me, that was interesting. I see the Fish and Wildlife in the state of North Carolina working better together, and that's a relationship that had to get better. So that's to me very exciting that is. And in some of the meetings I've been in, some of the politicians, like you can almost see them have that, oh, well, I didn't know that. That's not how it was explained to me. And here you're having a Fish and Wildlife person explaining whatever it is. And you're like, see, sometimes it's really good to ask those questions and get the information from the people who know, not from a neighbor down the street who thinks they know. So I do think the relationships are getting better. I feel like right now, as soon as I say it, it'll blow up tomorrow, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. There was a period in time where it was really difficult to be in this job. There was a year I went from home to work. It was just so charged. I've been run off the road. I've had to leave restaurants, and they always seem to want to chat with me loudly in the grocery store. And so it was very difficult. I had moments of, I just don't know. I just don't know if I can do this. But I did. I worked through it, and it's not about me. It's just about that things were really tense, and we're not there right now. So fingers crossed. Like I said, it'll probably all blow up tomorrow, but let's not hope not.
What we've noticed as the similarity to a lot of folks like yourself is that it's an ebb and flow process that happens daily, hourly, weekly, whatever it is. And you're all the ones that are literally on the front line for whether it's conservation, protection, breeding, whatever it is, to enlist the safety and protection for this specific species. And it takes a lot of heart and grit. And, there are a lot of people that probably couldn't do this job, and you've been doing it for 18 years. You've been, steadfast in it, and it's wonderful to see that. And the amount of information that you're able to share with Stephen and I is wonderful. And that's what I think that's what we're here for, is to make sure that everybody knows the information, that they can go and get this information. What's the best way, speaking of information, what's the best way that you guys distribute all the stuff that people need to know, especially if they're in your state, in the state, around these areas, and they say, red wolves, what's this all about? What's the best way that you've found that you can get across to people what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why it's so important?
So I think a couple ways we do, we call them email blasts. We'll do an email blast. Social media is great. My board chair is in charge of our Facebook page. She does a great job. Neil Hutt. I'm in charge of Instagram. I do a horrible job. Horrible. Some days I'm here in the office like, well, what in the world? Like, here I am at my desk. But I actually just started a podcast. I'm 4 episodes in, and I need to do one this week because I've been traveling and then was sick for the last couple weeks, and I've enjoyed that. I enjoy when there's somebody to talk to versus just me talking. But sometimes I have things to say, and so it's just better that it's me. And I enjoy that. It was kind of difficult and weird at first to sit in the office and talk to myself, but I'm kind of getting used to it. My dog comes to work with me every day, so I just figure I'm talking to Lucy and she's probably asleep, not paying attention to me. We're always on the lookout for new ways. That's something I'm putting our budget together now for next year. And we're going to talk about fundraising, and we're going to talk about different ways, new ways. How do we fundraise? I mean, let's be realistic, without the funds, and we are not federally or state sponsored. It's all individual donations. How do we reach more people? How do we reach a different demographic, probably through something other than what I'm not doing? And how do we do that? And how do we do that within our means? Because we are a small organization. I always say we're a mile wide, but 10 miles deep. We are just focused on the red wolf and have always just been focused on the red wolf, which I think makes us stand out a little bit from other organizations that might be involved with other species or other wildlands or anything like that. So I do think that gives us a distinct advantage.
No, that's wonderful. And
Yeah.
that's any of those of you that are listening right now, contact Kim, because she's
Yeah.
like, maybe she can help her with the podcast, social media, fundraising. Go ahead and do that. What's the best way give everybody the website,
Sure.
Instagram, podcast?
Okay.
How can people learn more about Red Wolf Coalition?
So the website is redwolves, REDWOLVES.com. For any of you science geeks out there, we have an amazing research library. We try to put every paper out there. You can read to your heart's content. I always have to have dictionary.com open when I read a lot of that. Our Facebook page is Red Wolf Coalition. Same thing for Instagram. I don't do TikTok, probably should. Twitter, we have one, Red Wolf Coalition. Again, those are my deficiencies that I really need to do a better job of doing. And I don't. That's on my you need to do a better job list.
Fair enough.
And then everybody can reach us. We're here in Columbia. My email is kwheeler@redwolves.com. I always encourage people, if they want to reach out. There's also a link on our website that comes just in the general mailbox that comes to me. So I answer a lot of questions, get lots of pictures of people that think they have red wolves. So I answer everyone. It's just me. I'm the only paid staff person. I have volunteers and then a very active board.
Nice. I mean, everybody who wants to get involved, obviously, get in touch with Kim, and she'll give you all the Red Wolf information you want.
Absolutely.
My last question for you, Kim, is when you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes to your mind?
It's funny. I ask that question whenever I start a program. Elegant. I think wolves are elegant. All wolves, when you watch them move and you see their muscles in their legs, how they're just graceful. They're elegant. They really are elegant, and they are worth a spot on this earth. They deserve an opportunity to live free and wild. We humans just have to let them. But that's the hard part.
Yeah. That's why we're all trying to get the information out there.
Absolutely.
Kim
And
Wheeler.
thank you guys for your work.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for spending the time with us and just really giving us the education on red wolves. And this is going to be a great episode for everybody to listen to.
I hope
just
so.
stick with us. Yeah, just stick with us for a minute while we sign off. Kim Wheeler, thank you so much. Hal's all out there, and Stephen, I'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.